Hello and welcome to another edition of Mailbag. What is Mailbag? Well, Mailbag is a feature of the channel where you guys leave lots of comments on the channel and I attempt to answer those comments, or if I can't answer those comments, I throw it out to you guys who have more knowledge on some of this stuff than I do. So let's get into the first mailbag of this session. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. I'm not sure whether the next comment question comes from Rast is love or Rasta love. So either one or the other, but I'm going to say Rast. In response to USB Paganomics, a video I did in February 2018. And what I'm going to say is, or what Rasta says is, hello, I hope auto translation works for you when you are at the computer, and I apologise for writing in another language. Can I ask a question about this synthesizer? I have an IK UNO Synth. It runs micro USB and it produces a terrible hum and noise if you connect it to a computer or network. Is there any way to fix this? And again, I seem to have a number of people who write to me in Russian. I can't read Russian. I just thought I might mention that, but the translation seems to work okay. Anyway, I responded in English, and I'm responding this way in English as well. Anyway, question is, when you connect two instruments, do you get hum? In general, when you connect two instruments and you get a hum, that is normally what a mains electricity issue. The hum, not all the time, but let's say 90% of the time, it's something to do with the grounding issue. And you may hear it referred to by various individuals as 50 hertz or 60 hertz hum, because that's what the electricity networks tend to run at around the world. It's either 50 hertz, which is what it is in the UK and Europe, or it's 60 hertz, which is what it is in the Americas, South America, and other places around the world. But that's generally where this is coming from. It's a ground loop issue. And it could be caused by a number of setups within your MIDI setup, or within your audio setup, not necessarily MIDI. But MIDI can also cause the issue. So, so the questions that I sort of fed back on this, and these are kind of my troubleshooting, is how are you powering the IK UNO? Can it be powered by batteries? Have you tried this option and do you still get a hum? I noticed that you can power the synth from USB. Are you powering directly using a USB power and data splitter or from the computer that you are attaching to? Try powering it in a different way. 3, I'm assuming that the way that you have phrased your question, that you're using some sort of USB audio, does the hum happen if you plug the unit directly into some sort of amplification device? 4, have you tried different USB cables? And you'd be surprised on that one. Okay, cheap USB cables, as many people turn around and say, USB cable is a USB cable. It is not. Cheap USB cables and the way they are put together can affect the data being transmitted and the power being transmitted across them. So just bear that in mind. I'm not saying you have to go and buy gold-plated USB cables, but don't be fooled that cheap USB cables are a bargain. Now you could also try wrapping a ferrite ring, wrapping the USB cable through a ferrite ring, which is kind of an old school way, and it just blocks interference that comes from, or electromagnetic interference that could be on the cable itself. It's an old school way of doing it, and sometimes if you kind of get it wrong, it can be also an old school way of blowing something up. And finally, if you're using a laptop, do you still get the hum if you're working on the laptop's battery. And this could indicate that the power supply is poorly suppressed. This could be the case if you're using a desktop computer. So there were kind of the troubleshooting parameters that I sent across to Rasta. Yeah. And what he came back to me and said is, as soon as he plugged it in using batteries, the hum went away. So that kind of told me that it was something to do with mains power. And he then wrote back to me and said he'd gone off and invested in a slightly more expensive USB charger. And things seem to have calmed down. So there you go. So something has a poorly suppressed USB charger. And again, what I would say here is cheap is not good. I don't recommend you buy Apple, but there are USB chargers out there that are correctly suppressed and not cheap shite from the Far East. And I don't mean that in any derogatory sense, but if you looked at what some of these guys do in terms of these cheap chargers that look like Apple chargers or look like phone chargers, they are not. They are cheap imitations made with cheap components, and they also have the habit of going poof. So all of a sudden you end up with a fire with the charger in the socket, and that can lead to some fairly wide-ranging consequences in terms of, you could set your house on fire with some of this stuff. So, what I would say is, and it's really difficult. I know it's really difficult. In the UK, we often get trading standards programs on the BBC, majority of on the BBC, I might add, where guys have tested USB chargers, and when they've opened up the charger, it's a blob of silicon glue with some very dangerous electronics in it to give out 5 volts. And you look at this thing and you just think, and I'm plugging that into my mains and expecting it not to fail. Anyway, that's by the by. But there you go. That kind of is the sort of whole 9 yards on that one.